This TikToker is facing life in prison for ending her boyfriend's life, but I guess she's also blowing kisses in court. Welcome back to another episode of what in the world is going on with these darn influencers, because for some reason, a whole bunch of them just can't act right. So, okay, after sitting in jail for more than 3 years awaiting trial, and after being denied bond, yet again, she shows up to a motions hearing, sticking her tongue out and puckering up at the people in the courtroom. Okay, ma'am, you're charged with second-degree murder. You're about to stand trial this spring. Why are you acting like this? Because if you're claiming self-defense and your entire future depends on a jury believing you were terrified and had no other choice, why are you blowing kisses like this is some sort of like red carpet event? Like, hello? And also, like, I know a lot of you guys are probably lost here, but the story starts in April 2022 because police were then called to a luxury apartment building in Miami. And inside the apartment, they found a 27-year-old Christian Toby Obumseli, no longer responsive. Courtney here took his life with a knife, and she's claiming self-defense. And Courtney Clemmy, she's a TikToker, Instagram model, and OF girl. And she has millions of followers, and she's known online as Courtney Taylor. But by the time first responders arrived, Toby was bleeding heavily and would later lose his life to those injuries.
In the next room, paramedics are trying to help Christian.
Sit down, sit down, sit down. Do me a favor, sit down. Do not move.
Why are you yelling at me?
Do not move.
Why are you yelling at me?
Do not move, sit down.
Okay. Oh my God, oh my God.
Courtney is begging to see him, but police explain she cannot go back inside because the apartment is considered a crime scene.
I'm covered in his blood because I'm trying to save him.
I understand
I'm trying to save him.
I understand that.
And if I don't, you'll can't, then what will I do with him?
All right.
I need him. He's like my other half.
And Courtney didn't deny what happened. She acknowledged that she ended his life, but said that she was acting in self-defense. She told investigators that Toby had pushed her and thrown her to the floor, then claimed that she grabbed a knife and threw it at him from about 10 feet away. And that's the version of events her defense has stood by. But it's safe to say the medical examiner's stories complicated that story, because the autopsy concluded that Obumseli, he passed away from a forceful downward thrust from a blade that went 3 inches into his chest, which, you know, was piercing a major artery. And investigators essentially say that the fatal wound could not have been caused by a knife thrown from that distance. And that's the detail which has people questioning everything about her story, because thrown knife versus downward plunge, that's the question. And this has been the biggest point of tension for the entire case. But she wasn't arrested that day or even the next day. In fact, she wasn't taken into custody until 4 months later, in August of 2022, because then she was arrested in Hawaii at a rehab facility, and she was then extradited back to Florida to face a charge of second-degree murder. And at the time of her arrest, Miami-Dade State Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Rundle described the incident as coming from a tempestuous and combative relationship that began in November of 2020. And that relationship had already drawn attention long before Toby lost his life, because the couple had previously lived in Austin, Texas. And there, a former neighbor said that their fights were so frequent and intense that, according to reporting at the time, police were called to their residence multiple times. So after moving to Miami, prosecutors said the violence continued and that their building was even preparing to evict them because of the repeated disturbances. Like, do you know how bad the fighting has to be to get evicted over fighting? Then, video surfaces from a trip the couple took to Aspen just months before Toby's life was ended. And in that footage, Courtney can be seen hitting him repeatedly during an argument. I'm unsure how much we could actually show of that footage here, but it looks bad.
Sober for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And now why am I not sober? Because of you.
New video shows model Courtney Clemmy hitting then boyfriend Christian Obumseli over a dozen times while on a trip in Aspen, Colorado. This is one of more than 100 pieces of evidence released to the Obumseli family civil attorney as part of the investigation.
In that video, you can see Courtney acting erratically. You can see her hitting Christian multiple times, which unfortunately is consistent with her behavior throughout this entire case.
But her attorney later described the relationship as toxic and said that evidence exists that Obumseli physically abused Courtney on prior occasions, and on April 3rd, 2022, Courtney was forced to defend herself from Obumseli's physical attack. Well, I mean, it's hard to say because we weren't there and we don't have camera footage of what happened. But to me, it looks like there's also evidence that Courtney did this back to Toby. So from the beginning, this case has not been simple whatsoever. On one side, you have a woman claiming self-defense and what she describes as an abusive relationship. On the other side, you have forensic evidence that prosecutors argue does not match up to her story. And as this case has moved forward, it's only become more and more complicated because it wasn't just Courtney who ended up facing charges, her parents did as well. Well, that definitely doesn't make her look good. And Kim and Deborah Clenny were taken into custody in Texas on out-of-state felony charges connected to the case. Because according to the arrest warrant affidavit, Kim, Deborah, and Courtney were charged with one count of unauthorized access of a computer system, or electronic device belonging to Christian Obumseli. Because investigators believe that Obumseli's laptop had been taken from the Miami apartment after his passing and accessed without permission. And the Obumseli family's attorneys released a statement saying the Obumseli family is saddened to hear the reports that Courtney's parents illegally took possession of Christian's laptop. And this is yet another disturbing reminder of the horrible crimes committed against their family. The Clenny's family's attorney fired back, basically saying that they were saddened to hear her parents were arrested, and it was an overstep by the prosecution. They also said, "We believe the Clenny family has been targeted with some trumped up charges to discredit them in the press and make their lives miserable. It stinks of a power play by prosecutors to control the narrative." So now, not only was Courtney facing a murder charge, her parents were facing felony charges tied to alleged computer access. And in July of 2024, the computer hacking charges were dropped because of a circuit judge ruled that Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office violated attorney-client privilege when investigators seized text messages and emails between Courtney, her parents, and her attorneys. And that doesn't mean that they didn't take the computer, it just means the investigators got a hold of information that was meant to be between Courtney's family and their lawyers. And on the murder charge side of things, Courtney was charged with second-degree murder. When she first went into the judge, her legal team pushed for a bond. They argued that she was not a flight risk and that she should be allowed to await trial outside of jail. But the judge disagreed. She was denied bond and she's been behind bars ever since. Over the next few months, though, more evidence started coming out. And through all of this, through the public hearings, the public statements, the video evidence, the parents' arrest, Courtney Clenny, she remained in jail. And by the time 2025 rolled around, Courtney Clenny had been in jail for more than 3 years. So her defense team tried again. In December, she was back in court asking the judge to reconsider bond. Her attorneys argued that she didn't have the money she once did. They said that she wasn't a flight risk and that she didn't pose a danger to the community. They told the court that if she was to be released, she would go back to Texas and live with her parents in BK. And prosecutors argued that the evidence presented by the defense did not change the situation and that Clenny should not be considered for bond. The judge also agreed with the state and bond was denied yet again, which means, she has to wait in jail until her trial. But the December hearing did actually lead to a trial date. So the judge set the trial to begin on April 27, 2026. And prosecutors said they believe the case would take less than 2 weeks to present. So after years of legal back and forth, after motions, hearings, and privilege disputes, and public statements, this case finally has a clock on it. Spring of 2026. And I mean, honestly, the stakes could not be higher because if convicted, she could face life in prison. Her defense is still centered around the self-defense, but they also have pushed for the case to be considered manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. And the prosecution maintains that the evidence shows an intentional act, pointing again to the autopsy finding of a forceful downward thrust, and that couldn't have just been made from a knife being thrown from 10 feet away. And I guess at this time, a jury will eventually decide, was this self-defense during a violent domestic dispute, or was it all intentional? And then, just as trial season was approaching, she walked into court last week and went viral once again, because this court appearance was for, I guess, her emotions hearing ahead of the trial. So this wasn't her trial itself. This was one of those hearings where lawyers argue about what evidence the jury will and won't see. And before the proceedings even began, she started making faces at the people in the courtroom. And according to reporting from the hearing, Clenny was seen sticking out her tongue and puckering like she wanted someone's kiss. Like, again, ma'am, your life is on the line here. Why are you acting like this? But she's been in jail for more than 3 years. She's facing second-degree murder charges, and, she could spend the rest of her life in prison, and this is what she's deciding to do. So, yeah. But her defense team tried to strike down one of the prosecutor's expert witnesses, Dr. Michael Brandon, because apparently the issue is that Brandon had sued the defense proposed expert, Dr. Lenore Walker, for defamation more than 20 years ago. And the case was settled with an agreement that they would not personally malign with each other. And Walker testified that it would make her uncomfortable to remain involved if Brandon stayed in the case. Basically, the defense and the prosecution's star witnesses are fighting on top of everything else happening here. So, That makes this case even more interesting. But Brandon testified that there's no reason why both sides can't continue if everyone keeps it professional. But Judge Andrea Wolfson denied the defense's motion, and there was also a fight over recordings, because prosecutors also want to introduce recordings that Christian Albumcelli secretly made of Courtney before his passing. And the defense argued those recordings were illegal recordings and should be excluded. And Judge Wolfson ruled to exclude most of them, but we'll still see some of these secret recordings when the trial comes around, because recordings made in the apartment's lobby and on the balcony can be used, ruling there was no reasonable expectation of privacy in those areas. So apparently some of that audio will also be played for a jury.
I'm actually not having a good day, or I actually literally want to kill you, but you don't take me seriously.
So her trial is set to begin on April 27, 2026. 12 people will be asked to decide whether this was self-defense in a volatile relationship or whether this was an intentional act. And honestly, when you're about to ask 12 strangers to believe you were terrified for your life, blowing kisses in court doesn't really seem like the best idea. So, hey, this will be interesting to see how it all plays out. But until then, I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. I am back with daily uploads again. I took a break after all my traveling, but I have so much content that's stacked up for you guys, so I'll see you guys soon. Peace. Subscribe if you're new, drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Peace. That was like my third outro in 2 seconds. See ya. That was the fourth.